Well, welcome to Your Story with Melinda. I have a great guest for you today. It's Colleen Blake-Miller, who's a registered psychotherapist who shares a lot of good stuff about ourselves and the lies that we believe, that we are some of our greatest inner critics, and how those things in our minds have made us make decisions that aren't really healthy for us. So she tells me about how we can change those negative thoughts into good thoughts, godly thoughts that will help us in our lives. She also shares very honestly and vulnerably about a life-altering decision she made that only was changed by Christian community and God. You're not going to want to miss it. Colleen Blake-Miller, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Excellent. Thank you for having me.
Love this. Now, let's just start off with just the meaty, gritty stuff. Mm-hmm. You're a registered psychotherapist.
Yes.
And so my question is, just to start off the show with a very, easy question. Mm-hmm. What do you find are the most common issues, or maybe one issue that when people come to see you as a psychotherapist, mm-hmm. it's like that's the big issue. That's the common thing that most people come to you about for help.
Yes. So I do work a lot with individuals struggling with depression and anxiety. But I mean, there's a lot of relationship struggles as well. I happen to be a fan of couple therapy. It's the hardest kind of work, mm-hmm. but I find it very rewarding. What I will say, though, is a common theme in a lot of the, if not most of the clients that I work with, is battling negativity in your mind. Wow. So, Joyce Meyers had written that book, Battlefield of the Mind. Mm-hmm. That is, when you get down to the nitty-gritty, a lot of us struggle with the negative self-talk, this negative view of who we are. And then that informs, what we do in life and, the decisions we make, the people that we're inviting in. And it's hard work trying to tackle that. Yeah.
How does, for you, like when you're talking to them, if people are open to faith or are Christian that come to you, mm-hmm. how do they sort of change the inner critic or the negative thoughts into positive?
If someone is a person of faith, which a lot of the clients that I work with aren't necessarily, mm-hmm. They don't identify themselves as believers, but, God's truth is all truth. Yes. So it's about thinking in ways that are going to empower, that are going to, that's going to be truthful. So it's a lot of uncovering, what the lies are, mm-hmm. and things that, things that are encouraging. For someone who's a believer who believes the Bible, I would encourage them to think, how God thinks about them.
Yes.
And I think that when you ask that question, often people, especially believers, will be able to kind of get it a little bit more. Mm-hmm. Like stop talking to yourself like somebody who is, against what God says.
Yeah.
And they're able to be, in a way, nicer to themselves.
Yeah.
More empathetic, more understanding, mm-hmm. offer themselves more grace when they consider, okay, if Christ were sitting right here, which he is,
yeah.
What would he be saying right now to you?
Yeah. That's really good. I was just had a little dinner party with some friends, and we were talking about that inner critic and mm-hmm. how we have lived, mm-hmm. and as people are sort of like getting into their late 30s and 40s, yeah. how that inner critic, those negative thoughts have, really determined our life in some pretty negative ways.
Definitely.
We've listened to the lies and the negativity, and then have seen the world in that way, mm-hmm. and then done things or not done things because of it.
Yeah.
And it's amazing. We've sat there and go, really? So, we were talking about the inner critic of, I'm a loser, or I'm stupid, or I will fail at everything.
Yes.
And then you go, wow, you've lived your life all that way. Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. That's not freedom.
Yeah. And I think that when you say it out loud and you mm-hmm. hear yourself saying it, then you understand how, in some ways, how silly it seems, or how ridiculous, or how horrible, right?
Yes.
But the problem is we don't say what we're thinking enough. We don't write it out. We whether it's we're not journaling, we're not having those heart-to-heart conversations, we're not being honest
yes.
with ourselves and with each other. So it just sits in our head. And it really does control the direction of our life.
Yeah, that's big. Because a lot of people do. They sit in their head. They keep it in their head, in their minds, and they just keep playing it over and over, and then manifest into something bigger.
Definitely.
And then it's like, well, that's actually not even reality.
No, a lot of it isn't. A lot of it is not what's real, but it becomes real when we just let it sit there and grow deep, deep, deep roots inside of our heart. Yeah,
that's good. I know that later in the show we're going to talk a little bit about some things that you're passionate about, and I am, as far as authenticity, being free from the lies and things. I'm looking forward to that. But before we do that, I want to hear about you, because the show is your story. Being a psychotherapist, was that something you wanted, and then that you always wanted to be? And then second, how did you find Jesus? When was a decision made for you? It's like, my life is going to be about following Jesus. So maybe take us back a little bit about your own story.
Okay, so my background is I'm a PK, pastor's kid.
Okay.
So born and raised in the church. As early as I can remember, I was serving in the church in the sense of you're gonna go and sing, right? Like music was something that was really important to me from a little infant, as my parents tell me the story. And as soon as we could stand up, we had to sing. And we did a lot of competitions, that brought us to different cities, that, allowed us to grow in those areas. I did drama, I did music. As far as my relationship with Christ, from a very, very young age, I fell in love with Jesus. 100% began out of, I think, fear, because I was afraid of being left behind in the rapture, if I'm going to be really honest. They had those rapture movies. And, I remember my baptism, I was like 8 or 9 years old, and my testimony was, I just don't want to be left behind in the rapture. But, the thing is, and even from a young age, I will say that this evangelistic heart of mine was there, because I remember trying to convince my little brother. I was like, Kenny, you don't get it. You've got to get saved, and just this fear of being separated from God. And I must say that is just my genuine heart. He's just made me in a way that I'm tender-hearted towards him, and I love him. Now, that said, my life hasn't always been, I haven't made the decisions necessarily that were on the path that he set for me the whole way. But God has been just a huge source of strength in my life from as far as I can remember. And without a question, I know the call in my life is just to share his truth and to shine his light in a way that will draw people to him. 1,000%. Like, that's the reason I'm here. Yeah.
So 4 kids, husband. How did all that come about? That's a busy life.
Yes, life is very busy. Oh my goodness. So my husband and I, he's actually my first and only boyfriend, if you can believe that. Yes. Growing up, nobody wanted me, Melinda.
Oh, Colleen.
Nobody wanted to. You think I'm kidding?
Really?
I'm telling you, it just never worked out for me. I mean, I was totally boy crazy from as early as I can remember, but the boys that I liked just, wanted to be friends. And so...
that one, the friends.
So I think that's actually where my struggle with self-worth and really appreciating who I was that journey for me began, because I just always wanted somebody to love me back, like a boy. And it took me 24 years to meet somebody that actually wanted to, kind of do this thing with me. And still we struggled. So, I mean, I guess September will be 12 years. And 4 kids later, we're pressing on.
Wow.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that, because I was like, that resonates, that sort of wanting to, be liked, especially for boys. And, because a lot of our listeners and viewers are women, I think they're like, yeah, we get that. Because that longing and desire then drives you in some poor decision making.
Yes.
Because of that, even for me, I come to Canada, I'm kind of sort of this minority, because I'm, Filipino in a very Anglo-Saxon white community, and I wasn't the norm of what beauty I thought the standard beauty here in Canada when we first came. And so then always the desire to be loved, and so you're always manipulating or trying and either forcing people to love you or then feeling the rejection and then going, oh, I'm not valuable, I'm not worthy, I'm not pretty enough. And then that gets in your young head and that causes some really bad decisions.
Yeah, definitely.
What about for you? You say that it's sort of like your one and only, but what was that journey like for you?
So, for me, one of the things you'd asked me before was how I fell into this profession. And I was definitely the girl who always had, others always had my ear. I was always the friend that people would call when they were having, whether it be boy troubles or struggles, amongst, peers and that kind of thing. So I always knew from very, very young on that I would be a helper. And I think in some ways when you are in that place, you don't necessarily have the people that you go to find the support and the help that you need. Growing up, my girlfriends were used to a lot of the stories that I would tell about boys that I liked. But then, this scenario was a little bit different because my then, guy friend, which is now my husband, he hadn't had much experience with relationships either. I was his first girlfriend. And so I think a lot of the things that you naturally go through when you're like a teenager, like, kind of figuring out the kinds of person that you like, the things you like, we were doing that together for the very first time. So one of the things that definitely was a pivotal moment in my life. So I would say like around 24, that's when we started, becoming more serious. We were friends for a few years prior. We became sexually active, and then I got pregnant. I got pregnant at 24, and then really, if I'm going to be really, really honest, he convinced me, we can't do this. We need to, you need to have an abortion. Like we can't really, we can't go, like you can't go to your father and your church and tell them you're pregnant out of wedlock. They're going to like crucify him. And to be really honest, I'll put a disclaimer out there. He's a really great guy, and God has done a lot through him and through, I guess, obedience. But at the time, like that was the first time that he ever said I love me was in the context of you need to, have an abortion. So for someone who has been longing to hear that for as long as she can remember, I did definitely feel as though I never thought it was the right thing to do. I think I just caved into the fear. Yeah. Right? Like we said earlier, the fear of what would happen. Now I see him as a father. He's an incredible, like he's an amazing man. He would have been an amazing father then too. But the fear, like we were both just gripped by fear and the lie of you'll never be able to get over this. And then, I made the decision to terminate the pregnancy. And so for me, that was really tough because for a couple of years, it was about 2 years that I was like kind of suffering in silence, not sharing with my loved ones. My family didn't know, my siblings didn't know. At the time where I worked, it was I couldn't say that I had done what I did because I was working at a pregnancy care center at the time. It was a faith-based organization. And we kind of, support women in scenarios like that, and we want to encourage them to choose a life. That's kind of what I, what committed to really do. And then for myself to have made an opposite decision. It was a really, really difficult time for me. But I'll tell you what, the turnaround for me was when and that's the thing about God, is it doesn't matter how messy the situation gets or how messy your life gets, he still is calling you back to him. Yes, you've messed up. Yes, you're hurting. Yes, because the relationship with he and I did not get better. It actually got worse because, I was total rejection and total hurt because here it is, you don't have the child that you should have had, and you don't have the relationship that you should have had because he was still not, ready to be in a relationship with me at the time. So, but once I decided to obey God, and I'll tell you when it happened. I went away, the pregnancy center that I was at the time, that I was working at, we went to a conference, and unbeknownst to my director at the time, she didn't know that I had had this experience. she put me in the post-abortion support track.
Oh, come on.
Yeah.
Without even knowing.
Without knowing. Because she wanted me to be able to run those groups at the agency. And so here it is, I'm getting a place to kind of flesh out a lot of what I've been carrying. Wow. And while I was sitting in the workshops, the Holy Spirit spoke to my heart and said, you know what? I can only use you as much as you are willing to, open up and be transparent and be honest. And, I knew that I had a passion to encourage and inspire and motivate and share the gospel. But it was very clear to me that there was only so far God could take me if I would continue to hide and, a part of my story. And so right then and there, I knew I had to open up and share. So I went to the woman who was facilitating. Yeah. We met, for lunch, and I opened up to her, and she walked with me. And she shared with me, she kind of gave me some advice as far as how to. So I shared it with not then. It took me, maybe a few weeks, and I shared it with, my supervisor or my director, then with the board, and then I shared it with my family and with my church, my siblings, and I promise you that the life I have now. This incredible man who is the love of my life, my 4 children, none of that would be my reality if I chose not to walk in obedience. I believe that with all of my heart.
That's huge.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people listening right now would say, no, there's too much of risk in that. I want to hide in the darkness. Yes. And in that. And some of that is because, they're overcome by shame, fear. Yeah. But, I think even for myself, when I had to share about, the breakdown of my marriage in ministry, I went through a divorce. If I had sort of kept that quiet and just said, it's my issue and, hid away, I would not be, I believe, where I am today. No. I think because of that, I am where I am. Yes. And because, you're opening yourself up, you're allowing community to support you. Was there anybody that treated you unkindly when you shared, or was it mainly the response was with grace and mercy? What was your experience?
I would say 99.9 was grace and mercy. Yeah, okay. The love and the commitment of my family, my parents in particular, my father. Whoa, had I never had this experience, I wouldn't understand the depth of their love for me. Yeah. If I had hit it.
Beautiful.
Because you think, oh, you're my dad, you're my mom, of course you're going to accept me. But then the enemy says to you, well, if they only knew all of who you really are, then no, they wouldn't love you. Yeah. But guess what? Now they do. Yeah. And they shocked me. There was not even an angry word that was said to me.
Colleen, this is key, because how many stories have we heard, and especially religious people, Christian people, who have shunned their children on things that they don't agree with. Yeah. And the trajectory of their lives and story either have ended up on the street or disillusioned by God or angry at the church or broken. And I'm saying this to parents because how you respond to your children. You could be so incredibly disappointed, but if you respond out of anger and judgment, it will change their life forever. Yeah. And I've seen it over with my parents too, where they, in so many situations with their own kids, my brother, sister, myself, they responded out of love and grace, and that has made all the difference. Huge. Because it'd been so easy for the church and your parents to say, oh my goodness, what an embarrassment, look at you, you're a PK, you should know better.
You should know better, and I did. Yeah. And I did.
What would be your encouragement to parents, because, you want so much for your kids, and obviously there's disappointments because they don't end up like you. But how does a parent get to that place? Because I would say a lot of parents go, but I struggle and I want to be angry. I would never forgive them if, they came out to me or they had an abortion or they did something, I've heard that. Yeah. And it's like, yeah, but then there are consequences to that.
There are. I can't even honestly answer it because my kids are still so young. And I just pray to the Lord that I would have the wisdom to know how to respond to them in a way that is going to, redirect them to God versus pushing them away from them. can use my parents as far as how they were to me as a guide for myself. And I know, like, my mom, she, like, I could tell I'm like, I can see it now. I'm sitting in their, like, in their family room. Well, it was ours at the time because I still lived at home. And my mom was kind of getting a little bit worked up, like, oh. And my father just very calmly said, you know what, Ethel, that's her name. This is not about you. This is not about me. It's about Colleen. And so for me, that is an example. So even where we have messed up, because, you know, as parents, we make mistakes every day. It's just getting back, getting our focus back on the main thing, which is our children. And at the end of the day, as a parent, what I want is to show, point my kids in the direction of God, show them, you know, how amazing it is to love him and to serve him and to have him a part of your life. They're on their own journey with God. I cannot navigate that for them. It's their story to walk out. And I have to have the faith to believe that God has them and he is going to keep them, and their story, you know, at the end of the day, I'm believing God will be a great one. You know, that's my, if I do nothing else in this world, I just want my kids to know who God is and to have a love for him. What that looks like, that's between them and God.
Yeah. See, I love that, because it's that balance of, okay, you know, we're going to lead and mentor and parent, but then we have to trust God that, you know, we've done all of our best. But I've seen where things have failed when parents have tried to control kids, and a lot of it's because they want them to be like themselves or the person they never were, so they're acting that out on their kids to be that person. And I think that that's a good encouragement you said, is that, you know, if we just say, okay, here's the thing. My role in your life is to, you know, ensure, you know, practical things, you get fed and you're well and that, but that ultimately is to show you Christ, to hopefully that you choose to follow him. And in that, the Holy Spirit will come and guide you. And that's the best, you know, mama can say, because the Holy Spirit will guide you. You have to make some choices and make decisions. But I think that's really powerful, and I think that's a good reminder to parents, you know, who are listening, because I think it's a challenge. But I think a lot of parents have messed up when they've tried to do it the other way and said, it's not directing them to God, it's directing them to what I want for you.
Yes, your vision of God. And you know
exactly.
What? Like, we are not perfect. We've all made mistakes. I think as long as you have an opportunity of a new day, you can always trust the Lord to direct you how to you know, fix or repair. I think repair is the right word. Repair whatever damage maybe has been done. And the older that your kids get is the more they can talk to you and say, you know, like I've had my kids say to me, Mommy, I don't like when you talk to Daddy like that. And it's like, oh my gosh, they can hear me. You guys are listening. And it's like conviction, right? So as long as we are here to you know, be willing to meet them and work on repairing, then God can do incredible things.
I know that a number of people, well, I am, a number of people and me are wondering, how did you then end up with him? Because that's a big thing. You're saying these things and then it's like, wait a second, now 4 kids later and you're still with him? Because that's a thing you're like, what? Like that seems so counter and opposite to what, you know, people would think you would have made, what decision you would have made, right?
Like, no. I broke things off with him after I came out, as it were, as far as being in the shadows of the darkness of my secrecy. I cut him off. I totally cut him off. I would not accept messages, emails, nothing. And then at one point, he had written a very, very, very long message. I remember I was still at the pregnancy center, and I had my director read it. And it was like 2 pages, single-spaced, bearing of his heart. And he said that he had talked to his parents, and he had talked to his pastors, and he, you know, he was ready. Of course, he was apologetic for the way that he, you know, handled things. And because it wasn't just that, right? The abortion was only, like, you know, there's many consequences for living a life that is opposite of what God is calling us to. So a lot of hurt was there. So when I finally did read the letter, I don't know what caused me to, because I had been ignoring him for a good couple of months. And I said, okay, let me hear him out. And when I had the conversation on the phone with him, I knew in my heart, I cannot trust my heart. My heart is just too, it's just, I can't trust my heart. So I said, you know what? If you can meet with my father and share with him where things are for you, and if my father thinks that this is a good idea for me to give you another chance, then fine. And I thought for sure he'd be like,
no way.
Like, no way. Right? And wouldn't you know, he didn't even skip a beat. He's like, fine, that's fine. I'm ready.
Wow.
I'll do it. So he met with my father. I remember I was studying at Tyndale at the time. I remember calling my dad after their meeting to like check in on how it went. And he met my father at church in the boardroom, just him and my dad. And he bared his heart with him. Wow. And my father said to me, Colleen, I've never seen a man cry. Like, he didn't cry. He bawled. He bawled. And my father said, as upset as I have been for what he has done, the hurt that he's caused you, I cannot stand in the way of what God is doing in your relationship.
It's powerful.
And then the rest is history. So, and then the thing that allowed for it for me to like really give my heart more and more is God really did change his heart. He became like commitment has been the issue from the beginning of time, and he like, I think maybe like a month after we started back again, he put a deposit on the engagement ring. And he literally was like, we're doing this, there's no question. He'd always said that we were going to be together. It's just that there was no fruit to demonstrate it. Whereas, things just, kind of just went full steam ahead as soon as he decided, okay, no, I've got one more chance. There's no way I can live my life without this woman. And, we're going to do it, and we're going to do it right. And he has never let me down. So, and it's 12 years later. Yeah.
Amazing. Yeah. Colleen, people are like, that's an amazing story, because there's so many factors in that shouldn't have been where you're at now and with the same man and having children. Yeah. What would you say, in all of this story was the thing? Like, I know it is God, but there's so many people involved that had to make decisions to then make the outcome be what it is today. I mean, overall, what would you say was the key? Well,
I think that not listening as much to what my friends had to say, that was such a huge factor, because as women, what we do is we talk to our girlfriends about these low down, dirty guys that hurt me, did this, blah, 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 blah. And where he can woo your heart back, he ain't wooing the hearts back of your friends.
Right.
And so even to this day, we joke, Leroy and I, about, had you listened to your friends, we would never, be together. Wow. And when God speaks to your heart, I think I because of the work that I do, I know that you have to be so careful as women, so that you're not being taken advantage of or misused or mistreated. We kind of, as independent women, we need to make sure that we're okay. And it's hard sometimes to figure out when we need to give someone another chance or give someone, an opportunity. I think that once you and the Lord have, a clear understanding that the pathway is safe, then you with the counsel of, a few select God-fearing individuals, like for myself and Leroy, that would have been our parents. And more my parents, I think, than his, because his parents weren't as much involved in, kind of our stories. His parents were always just like, oh, she's such a nice girl. Like, where my dad kind of, I'm just such an open person. So he knows like all of it, right? And just don't necessarily live your life according to other people's opinions, because at the end of the day, you go home and you live out the consequences of your choices. Nobody else. And I know when I got to the point of understanding that just because he didn't want to be with me doesn't make him a bad person. It just means that he's not for me. I was able to kind of just let him go and not, allow the games to continue. But when I saw, and when he proved to the ones that, God had put in my life as, guides and my parents in that sense, then I was okay. I was okay to trust God. And every day, it's like, for instance, there's a saying that it's faithfulness isn't necessarily based on one specific incident. It's faithfulness is demonstrated over a lifetime, really, because we all fall, we all make mistakes, we all do things that are wrong, but it's whether or not I'm willing to, acknowledge the hurt that I have caused, the pain that's there, to do the work to actually rebuild. That is what incredible marriages and families are built on, not perfection. Because it would have been nice, for my guy to have no negative, history between, he and I. But all we needed is to just be together for any length of time, and some hurt's going to come up because that's what we do. We're human. We harm one another. And so the same grace, understanding, and empathy that I would have had to say, okay, Leroy, I'm going to give you one more chance, I would still need that same grace, empathy, and understanding in marriage. Right? And it's mutual. It's reciprocal. He needs to have that for me, and I need to have that for him. So, wow, that's a long answer, but
good.
I would say start off by just getting to hear the voice of God in your ear. And if you need to get some, affirmation and confirmation from some, people that are godly in your life, allow God to bring those individuals to your, and then allow other people to stay in many ways out of your relationship. Because I have a lot of opinions about a lot of people, but that's not my life. And I'm not living out the consequences of my opinions and that kind of thing.
No, that's a good reminder. I love that. And that's actually really, it's surprising, but I understand that. Because sometimes, especially as women, we listen to so many voices and that actually determine our life. And then we don't actually make the right choice and seek out God to say, actually, what is that choice?
That's it.
And I've seen that too, where, many people made those decisions based on what people have said, and it hasn't been necessarily the right decision. Colleen, I love what your story. There were so many questions I wanted to ask you, but my takeaways from what I heard from you, it's so clear. There's so much about, sort of directing. So whether it's your kids, you want to direct them to God, right, and not control. For you, there was a lot about Christian community, godly wisdom, and always that focus on what does God want for me, and I think that's really important for women. Because like I said, again, completely inundated and influenced by so many other voices, media, social media, that a lot of times God's voice can get lost in the mix, and being attuned to listen for him and to him. Amazing. Where can our viewers and listeners get a hold of you if they want to know more about you?
So my website is my name, so www.colleenblakemiller.com. That's 2 L's, 2 E's. You can always find me on social media. Instagram is my go-to.
Okay, yep. I know that because I do follow you on Instagram.
And of course Facebook as well. And again, it's Colleen Blake-Miller. And people can message me there, and I'll love
and book
to
you for
connect.
Speaking.
Yes.
You've written a book.
Yes, that's right. I'm an author. In 2014, I put out my first book called The Life Map, and it's just a book basically that helps individuals that have a goal and they want to actually activate that goal, action it. It's a step-by-step sort of how to write the blueprint for where you want your life to go.
Excellent. Colleen Blake-Miller, thank you so much. You're going to have to come back because, like I said, we had questions
more questions.
Way more questions, and we were just talking. But that means for a good interview and story. So thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Melinda.
Hey, wait. I know the show has ended and all, but could you introduce me to some of your really good friends? Sharing this episode on social media really helps us reach more people, and this story could inspire others to get stronger in their faith.